Many of you wanted to know how to use Genesis 8 hair on the newer Genesis 9 figure without avoiding issues. So the problem, let me just go and demonstrate this here, with the Delilah hair by Winfield on the Zhu Lin 9 figure, and the hair is made for Genesis 8 and 8.1. So when you use it and load the hair and it triggers the autofit capability, then these types of issues appear here, these kinks in the hair. And, you know, notwithstanding the filament preview issues here, it isn't as straight as it is in the promo pictures where the hair is actually completely straight. And this happens because autofit infers new weight maps onto something that doesn't have them, and then often gets it wrong because it has to approximate here the shoulder line where the separation between the neck and the shoulders is. And so it doesn't work very well. Sometimes you might even run into this problem that when you select the hair on the parameters tab, some of these adjustment dials and the blow dials and stuff, they might not work properly. So it doesn't happen in this hair, but I have had hair, especially long and shoulder length hair, where these things are completely disabled and autofit has kind of destroyed that. So the solution to the puzzle is to basically not use it. So let me go make this hair invisible, select my Genesis 9 figure's head here. I've got another version of the hair which I've loaded without autofit, and that looks really nice. So it looks exactly like it was intended. And of course the blow dials, they also still work. More importantly, when I go and use maybe say power pose here, when I go and select my figure, I can still move it and the hair stays perfectly in place. So let me show you how to load that so that you can also enjoy Genesis 8 hair on the Genesis 9 figure without issues. Let me go and delete all the versions of the hair that I have available, select my Genesis 9 figure, and then I'll pick myself a hair. I'll stick with this one, Delilah hair by Winfield. So if I double click it with the figure selected, then you'll see that the autofit dialog gets triggered. And customarily you would go and say, okay, I'm going to use Genesis 8 female here, and then what type of hair is this? It is probably a hair that is shoulder length hair. So with my version, you don't do this. So you go, either you hit cancel and then the hair gets loaded like this, or you don't select the figure while loading the hair, and then the autofit dialog isn't being triggered. So the problem now is that the Delilah hair isn't in the correct position. So you need to select it and then zoom in here. Sadly, the manipulator of the hair is at the very bottom of the figure, so it'll be very difficult to use it for adjustment. So what I tend to do is zoom into the hair and then use the parameters tab. Under general transforms and then translation here, I'm going to go and use the Y translate and bring the hair prop down. So as close as you can get to the figure. With filament you can often see this outline of the figure and outline of the head here. So it is just about -9 on this figure, probably a little bit more than that. This is where a little bit of experimentation will come in handy. So let's call it -9.5 roughly. And then also the back doesn't quite line up with the head shape here, so I'm going to use the Z translate to move that a little bit further over here. So 1.3 maybe, something like that. So that's, you know, that looks about okay. I might also just change the hair color just so that we can see it a little bit better. Here with materials, I'm going to change this to something darker like so. Perfect. Now, if I go and move my figure though, you'll see that the hair doesn't move. So we're going to have to go and parent it to the correct position here. The hair doesn't move. We want it to move with the head. So the easiest way to do that is to right click on the head of the figure here and then choose the Genesis 9 head. And that in the scene tab should have opened our head. And now we're going to go and find our hair and left click and drag it onto the head like so. Left click and drag onto the head. And now it just gets parented into a different position. So as a result, when we go and move our figure around, it will now go and move the head with it. And it works really well for hair because the head doesn't have any complex motions like an elbow would have, so we don't have to deal with those types of things. So yeah, that is how I do it, and that's how I like using my Genesis 8 hair. And the shaders will still work fine, and it's just a matter of finding the correct position. With hair, it's also not a problem if this doesn't match the crown exactly. If you do have a head shape that is significantly different from the hair product, then you can always select the hair and go into these adjustment dials here. Often under adjusting, you have have ways to make the crown larger or the forehead larger, smaller and stuff. You can really go to town with that, but it's often not necessary, because in iRay this is still going to look just fine, even if it isn't exactly made for this type of head shape, because hair is loose and there's a lot of transparency involved. So it still looks good if only I had good lighting, which I don't, but imagine I did, then this would look really, really nice. So with a super basic set, I can see that the hair could probably come down a little bit. See that shadow here? That doesn't really look great. So once again, that's under transforms, and then you go to the Y translate of the hair, and I guess that needs to come down just a tad. Yeah, so this is a matter of trial and error and experimentation until it all looks good. So obviously it's a little bit more work to do this, and there's a bit more manual labor involved, and don't be afraid to make adjustments to it. So get as close as you can, either in filament or also in texture shaded view. That also looks really nice because you can see both the hair and you can see the Genesis figure underneath. So make sure if you make adjustments that these two things don't intersect. If you go, it's usually under the actor adjustments on the hair product. If you go have a look at the cap, for example, a cap top, if you go and manipulate that, this is what you don't want to see. This is kind of the hair intersecting with the figure's head, so you don't want to do that, but you also don't want to see something like that when there's too much of a gap. So see if you can get that as close as possible without intersecting. So we could probably do something like this, and then at the back here, it'll kind of depend if you have adjustment dials for that. Same at the top here. So this is cap forehead, and this is going to be different on a like here. This is what we don't want. We don't want that to intersect because that can lead to artifacts. So it'll really depend on the adjustments that the individual hair prop has. Some might not have as many as these, but the good ones do. And for the shorter hair that doesn't go beyond here, usually autofit works really well, because that hair at the top doesn't interfere with these shoulders or the neck bones, and that's where the issues come in. Yeah, so there we go. That is my method of fitting Genesis 8 hair to the Genesis 9 figure. First of all, the transformations, bring it down, and on the Z a little bit of transformation, and then see if you need to do any adjustments. And then the final judge is always going to be the render with better lighting settings than I currently have. I hope this was helpful. Have a good one. Enjoy Genesis 8 hair on Genesis 9, and I hope I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.